My dearest Earth friends, it is wonderful to be able to connect to you again. Today I would like to ask you, what is your spiritual goal? What are you hoping to accomplish with your spirituality? There is no right or wrong answer here, but it is good to be conscious and to be honest. People might say that their goal is spiritual growth, but spiritual growth can be quite painful and uncomfortable and perhaps isolating. It won't necessarily make your life easier or feel good, at least in the short term. Is spiritual growth what you're after, even if it doesn't feel good in the short term? From what I've observed, many spiritual people just want to feel good. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's not a wrong goal to have. It is understandable that people on Earth, who often have suffered much, would have that as their goal. People's desire to just feel good is illustrated by the spiritual ego that many spiritual people indulge in, which often feels good to the person who is being spiritually egoic, but it's obviously detrimental to their spiritual growth. The desired state of being that many spiritual people strive for is feeling good most of the time, and being unaffected by external negativity. If you read spiritual sites, it might seem like pretty much everyone is doing amazing and is feeling amazing all the time, and you're the only one who isn't. That really isn't true. This is just the Facebook effect, where people only post their happy moments and are quiet about the things that aren't happy. In reality, most spiritual people have dysfunction in their lives and they still quite often experience suffering. They just don't talk about it. Of the minority of people who genuinely feel good for the vast majority of the time, most of them are in a bubble, for either survival or narcissistic reasons. In this bubble they basically just ignore everything and everyone that isn't immediately feel good. They kick everything that isn't immediately feel good out of their lives, and they don't do even nearly as much as they could to help others or to heal their old wounds. And possibly they also suppress their own pain or unhealed parts. So it's more than them no longer consuming excessive amounts of intel and news and no longer meeting toxic people, which by itself is a fine thing to do. It may be the case that this person is in survival mode and he or she simply needs a bubble to get through life. So making a bubble for yourself is not necessarily the wrong choice to make. It's certainly better than just being depressed. People should put their own air mask on first, after all. On the other hand, some people in a bubble are mostly just interested in having a pleasant life for themselves, and they could do much more to help others but they choose not to. In this case, their bubble is more like a narcissistic kind of bubble, even if they dress up their lives in spiritual statements such as "my service is that I keep my own vibration high." We'll address that argument later in this message. If the person is in a bubble for narcissistic reasons, then that is in fact separation consciousness, because the person in such a bubble is ignoring all the other people who are suffering. Being in a bubble for narcissistic reasons is a bit like a hand deciding that it wants to keep its vibration high, and therefore it is refusing to extinguish the fire that is currently burning its foot. Because from a unity consciousness perspective, if you are a hand, then that homeless person is like your foot, and it is metaphorically on fire. From a unity consciousness perspective, spending a substantial amount of time on helping others is the only thing that makes sense. Now, if the hand is deeply struggling itself, then the hand is also metaphorically on fire, and it's entirely justified that the hand focuses on putting out its own fire first. In other words, if a person needs a bubble for survival reasons, then that is an entirely valid and possibly necessary choice. Now, let's meet Jack. Jack is in a bubble and he is able to bliss out during meditation. He usually feels happy and loving and connected to the universe. He can quote beautiful-sounding spiritual principles. He has some spiritual abilities and can manifest pretty well. He has a nice life. Yet, despite feeling good and having the energy and resources necessary to help others, he is not in fact helping others. Or picture Teacher Tom. Everything we said about Jack applies to Teacher Tom too, except Teacher Tom sells spiritual courses online for thousands of dollars. Teacher Tom really doesn't need to charge so much, he just does because he can. Teacher Tom also isn't using that money to help others. Instead, he's just hoarding it, or spending it to maintain a fancy, expensive lifestyle. Now, to be clear, it's absolutely fine if Teacher Tom charges a reasonable sum of money for his services. There's no problem with that. All I'm saying is that if Teacher Tom charges far more than he needs, and then is just hoarding the money or maintaining an expensive lifestyle, then is Teacher Tom serving others or is he serving himself? Teacher Tom might present a false binary here, pretending that the only two choices are charging $0 and starving, or charging thousands of dollars. But there is a middle ground there where you charge a reasonable amount of money. Teacher Tom might also argue that it's fine to charge thousands of dollars, because people should just manifest that money. Perhaps Teacher Tom points to a free manifestation video he made. But there's an inherent contradiction here. Anyone who can already manifest thousands of dollars at will, perhaps via that free video, may not need Teacher Tom's course. And people who do really need help may not be able to just spend thousands of dollars on a spiritual course. At best, Teacher Tom is refusing to help the people who most need his help in favor of people who are already doing pretty well. He's in the desert and he is selling expensive water to those who already have something to drink, and he is ignoring the people who are dying from thirst. Jack, the one in the bubble who wasn't doing anything to help others, and Teacher Tom, the one in the bubble who sells super expensive courses, may very well think they are in unity consciousness. After all, they can bliss out during meditation, they have some spiritual abilities and they have a great life. They feel good most of the time and aren't bothered by external negativity. Teacher Tom's very expensive courses may even genuinely be helping out some people. But in fact, both Jack and Teacher Tom are in separation consciousness. Why? Because if you're a hand and you're doing well and your foot is on fire, and you're not putting out the fire on your foot, then really you're proving that you don't see that foot, that homeless person, as being part of yourself. Therefore, it's separation consciousness. If you ignore the foot that is on fire so that you can sell super expensive courses to your shoulder when that shoulder is already doing pretty okay, that is still separation consciousness. Because if your actual foot was on fire, if people really were struggling in awful ways and you saw those people as part of you, then you wouldn't put up such high pay barriers that most people can't benefit from your work. People might at this point argue that the best kind of service they can offer is to keep their own vibrations high. But if your own foot was on fire, would you extinguish the fire or would you let your foot burn while trying to keep your vibration high? If you were struggling, would you want someone else to keep their own vibration high and carefully avoid you, or would you want that person to help you? There are plenty of ways in which you can profoundly help others, and thereby raise their vibration, at not too much effort to yourself. So if you think that high vibrations of the people of Earth are important, and they are, then helping out others and thereby substantially raising their vibrations is probably more efficient than you just being in a bubble. Except if you're struggling very much yourself and you need that bubble as a survival strategy. Someone who is actually in unity consciousness will probably feel that their unity consciousness makes their life harder, because every time they feel reasonably good and rested enough, their unity consciousness will nudge them to take on yet another project to help others. And while it will be very satisfying on one level, it won't always be fun or comfortable. But then again, it also doesn't feel good anymore to the unity-conscious person to just excessively indulge in fun while their foot is on fire, while other Earth humans are suffering. A person who is genuinely in unity consciousness may wish on some level they weren't in unity consciousness, because it's much nicer to just bliss out and have fun in a bubble than it is to help those who need it the most. Now, the exception here is a fully enlightened person. Such a person is in unity consciousness, and they're happy to be in unity consciousness, because they're not suffering or stressed when taking on projects and doing lots of work and helping large amounts of people. In fact, they love doing that. So fully enlightened people are probably the only ones who enjoy being in unity consciousness. But unless someone is regularly told by the people around them that their very presence feels amazing, they probably are not fully enlightened. Hence, if anyone claims they are in unity consciousness and they feel amazing and they have a great life, Well, they're probably in a bubble, which ultimately isn't a super advanced state of being. And they might also be doing the Facebook thing where they tell you how they feel in their best moments and they don't tell you about the other half of the time. The irony is that to a spiritual novice, a well-rested and well-off person in a bubble for narcissistic reasons looks more spiritually advanced than a person who is actually in unity consciousness and who has some amount of stress and fatigue and pain because they're talking to and empathizing with and working to help others who are suffering. So, to come back to the earlier question, what is your goal with spirituality? What do you want to reach? Do you just want a more pleasant and happier and less painful life? Nothing wrong with that. If currently you are struggling, that is quite possibly the best thing to focus on. Or do you want to help others or be of service? Or do you want spiritual growth? Or do you want some kind of mix of improving your own life, helping others, and spiritual growth? If you want spiritual growth, is that for you a means towards a happier life? Or is spiritual growth a goal in and of itself? If at some point you have to choose between more happiness in the upcoming years and less spiritual growth, or less happiness in the upcoming years and more spiritual growth, then which would you choose? Or is your goal something that I haven't mentioned? There are no right or wrong answers. But it is good to be honest and to be conscious. And I am curious. Feel free to share in the comments section, if you wish. With all my love. Your star sister, Tourmalayne.